Beneath the burning suns of Veros III, the wind howled across endless dunes, whispering secrets no one had heard for centuries, until one day, a small group of Zenthari archaeologists stumbled upon something impossible, a sliver of black metal poking through the sand like the tip of a buried blade. At first, they thought it was just debris from some forgotten cargo hauler, but scans quickly revealed a vast structure hidden below, deeper than anything natural. They called in the Galactic Preservation Council, who sent scientists, engineers, and cautious diplomats to investigate. Excavation machines dug for days, pulling back layers of time, until the sand trembled and the machines jammed against something far more massive than expected. The structure hummed, and energy readings spiked wildly, forcing the teams to back away as deep below, systems long dormant began to stir. Then came the tremor. At first, it was a soft rumble underfoot, like a sigh from the planet itself. But soon the ground cracked and dust burst skyward as something enormous pushed its way upward, shedding stone and sand like old skin. The alien team scattered in panic as the monstrous silhouette emerged, a massive ship, black as night, rising from its tomb beneath the surface. Its hull stretched half a kilometer, covered in strange glowing lines, and a long dead symbol slowly revealed itself on its side, a faded eagle perched on a planetary globe, surrounded by broken wings and a circle of stars, the emblem of the Terran Union, a civilization thought to be extinct for 7 centuries. All chatter fell silent. The ship hovered above the desert, motionless and silent, its sheer size dwarfing even the largest city ships in the Council's fleets. When the archaeologists tried to scan it again, their equipment either fried or returned scrambled data, as if the ship was deliberately blocking them. Lights flickered to life across its surface, then dimmed, like an eye blinking away centuries of sleep. A low, slow sound vibrated in the air, not through ears, but through bones, a hum of ancient power returning. Council warships in orbit immediately repositioned, raising shields and powering weapons, while debates raged across comms about whether to retreat, attack, or open communications. But before anyone could decide, the ship itself acted. With a mechanical sigh, a docking bay on its underbelly slid open, and out drifted a small drone, primitive by Council standards, yet unmistakably Terran in design. It broadcast a simple, chilling message in galactic common. This vessel is the TNS Dawnbreaker. Status, awakening. Request, data link for galactic status update. Panic rippled through every government across the stars. The Terran Union had vanished after the Cataclysm Wars, leaving only ruins and myths behind, feared and respected in equal measure. No one expected a supercarrier of theirs to survive, let alone rise from a forgotten world. The Dawnbreaker was not just a relic. It was a weapon of legend, a ghost from a time when humans bent the stars to their will and dared to challenge entire coalitions alone. Now it was awake. Council broadcasts tried to stall, offering cautious greetings and peace assurances, but received no response. On the surface, the archaeologists had been evacuated, yet one small team stayed behind, hidden, in a nearby dune crevice, unable to look away. They watched in awe as small lights began to move inside the ship's structure, flickering like stars behind thick, dark glass. Then came the second surprise, movement within. Deep in the Dawnbreaker's heart, behind reinforced walls and cryo chambers, lined like tombs, stasis pods began to flicker to life. Hazy with frost and age, they hissed open one by one, revealing armored figures curled within, eyes shut, breath shallow. Slowly, one opened her eyes, sharp, dark, and cold with calculation. Admiral Rhea Calderon, last recorded commander of the Dawnbreaker, took her first breath in centuries. Around her, officers stirred, weapons systems came online, and the ship's ancient AI, Athena, whispered fragmented reports into her neural interface. Calderon clenched her fists and stepped forward, steady despite the weight of time. She looked out through the bridge viewport at the alien skies above and issued her first command in 700 years. Begin full systems diagnostics. Get me a status report on the galaxy. and prepare the Dawnbreaker for possible conflict. Far above, the Galactic Council received a second transmission, clearer this time, direct and chilling. This is Admiral Calderon of the Terran Navy Supercarrier. Dawnbreaker, we are operational, requesting immediate update on galactic status. Priority Alpha. The galaxy paused, holding its breath, as the shadow of old Earth reawakened from the sand, and no one knew whether this return would bring peace or a second reckoning. Deep within the towering structure of the TNS Dawnbreaker, lights flickered like stars trapped behind walls of steel, and the sound of ancient machines echoed through empty corridors as the ship continued to wake from its long sleep, layer by layer, system by system. Cold stasis pods lined the cryodecks in endless rows, each holding a Terran soldier preserved through time, their bodies locked in perfect stillness while centuries passed above them. Slowly, one pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of mist as internal systems completed revival protocols. A figure stepped forward, unsteady at first, eyes blinking against the harsh light. It was Commander Jace Nolan, Calderon's second-in-command, muscles stiff but mind already sharp. More pods opened around him, first 10, then 20, then hundreds. Each Terran inside wore black armor edged in silver, the emblem of the Terran, Union emblazoned on their chests, still visible despite the frost and age. They didn't scream or panic. They had been trained for war, for confusion, and even for death. They simply stood, one after another, and waited for orders. In the bridge, Admiral Calderon watched with a heavy expression. Athena, the ship's AI, flickered beside her in a faint hologram, her voice slightly broken from damage, but still calm. Crew revival at 47%, weapon systems at 22%, structural integrity, holding. Calderon gave a single nod. That's enough. Begin minimal combat readiness protocol. Prepare to receive visitors. Outside the ship, Council scouts hovered at a cautious distance, transmitting silent warnings and encrypted messages. They had seen enough to be afraid. The ship was not like anything they had. Its armor looked aged but alive, as if it were healing itself. Long-range scans showed impossible tech, weapons that didn't match anything in the galactic databases, engines that barely emitted heat, and shielding layers that seemed to adapt every second. Still, a diplomatic team was sent. They arrived in a sleek shuttle painted in the soft blue of peace envoys and docked at one of the Dawnbreaker's external bays under escort. The docking tube extended, lights flickering as power was rerouted, and the hatch opened to reveal a single Terran soldier standing guard. No words, no movement, just silent presence. The diplomats stepped carefully inside, led by a tall Valthari ambassador whose species was known for calm voices and delicate speech. They were led through long, silent halls where hundreds of Terran crew were now walking, checking consoles, repairing walls, and restoring old systems without saying a word. The silence was heavy, the air almost electric with memory. Finally, they entered the command deck, where Admiral Calderon stood tall, in her black uniform, her eyes sharp and clear. "You've come to talk," she said simply. The ambassador bowed slightly. We thought humanity was extinct." Calderon gave a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. So did we, apparently. The council team offered peace, data, and explanations, but they did not answer Calderon's main question. What happened to Earth? What happened to the Terran Union? Why had no one searched for them? Why was there silence for 7 centuries? The ambassador hesitated, offering vague words about ancient wars and forgotten records. That was when Athena interrupted with a warning. Unidentified intrusion detected on outer hull. Deck 17. Calderon's face hardened. She tapped her comms. Deploy Alpha Response Team. On the other side of the ship, a breach pod had latched onto the hull, cutting through layers of armor with plasma drills. A group of alien mercenaries poured in, moving with practiced speed, hoping to grab tech or take control of a key system before being noticed, but they were already too late. Terran combat units in full exosuits surrounded them within seconds, emerging from hidden bulkheads like ghosts. The invaders barely had time to raise their weapons before being disabled by non-lethal rounds. Paralysis shocks and magnetic snares wrapped around them, pulling them down like tangled insects. The entire fight lasted less than a minute. One of the mercenaries, a scaled Rezic warrior, looked up in terror as a towering Terran leaned close and spoke the first word he had heard since arriving. Leave. Calderon let the council diplomats watch the entire incident on a nearby screen. Her message was clear. She had shown restraint, not destruction. The Dawnbreaker could still kill, but it chose not to, for now. As the diplomats returned to their shuttle, rattled and silent, Calderon stood once more before the ship's large observation window. The galaxy outside was no longer hers, no longer Terran. It was unfamiliar, wild, and ruled by those who had once feared humanity, and now hoped it was forgotten. But the dead had risen, not in rage, but in readiness. Calderon turned to Athena, voice calm but certain. Start searching for old Union beacons. Find out what remains. We are not ghosts. We are not relics. We are still here, and far beyond. Varos III, in a forgotten corner of deep space, a second ship stirred, battered and drifting, its systems barely alive, its single occupant waking to a world he no longer recognized. A weak signal blinked across space, a whisper in the dark. This is Colonel Saren Voss. If anyone hears this, I have information on Project Silence. They betrayed us all. On the Dawnbreaker, Athena paused and then turned to Calderon. We're not alone. In the heart of the galaxy, on a massive station orbiting the peaceful moon of Selvaris, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting, the kind not called in over 2 centuries, and tension filled the great chamber like a storm waiting to break. Leaders, generals, scientists, and envoys from every major species had arrived within hours of the Dawnbreaker's awakening, each one bringing fear, confusion, and questions that had no answers, for the name of that ship still echoed like thunder. Through the minds of the galaxy's oldest races, Terran Supercarrier, TNS Dawnbreaker, a myth from the time of flame and ruin, now proven real and alive. At the long oval table, the Carnathi representative, a tall, scale-plated warlord with a gleaming eye patch, slammed his fist against the desk, his voice sharp with panic and rage, demanding that the ship be destroyed immediately before it could rally others or reclaim ancient weapons lost to time. Across from him, the Valthari matron, calm and graceful in her shimmering robes, raised a hand and spoke softly, reminding everyone that the humans had once defended entire sectors during the Collapse Wars, sacrificing their fleets to protect colonies that were not even their own. Her words brought silence, but not peace, as murmurs spread through the room and hidden fears began to rise. What if humanity had not died out but had simply gone quiet, waiting, healing, preparing? The council's grand speaker, an ancient being with silver tendrils and a voice like rustling leaves, tried to regain control of the room, asking for verified data, evidence, anything that could explain how the Dawnbreaker had survived untouched. For 700 years beneath the sands of Varos III, a science officer played scans showing the ship's regeneration systems, self-repairing alloy, and controlled cryopreservation pods that had kept the Terran crew alive far longer than believed possible. Then came the transmission, recorded just hours before. Admiral Ria Calderon's calm, commanding voice requesting a galactic status update and making no threats, yet every sentence sounded like a warning, as though she were testing the waters of a galaxy she no longer recognized. Some called it a bluff, others a message of conquest disguised in diplomacy. Meanwhile, deep in secure archives, hidden files began to surface. Classified council documents from centuries ago, fragments of plans, warnings about the last days of the Terran Union, and whispers of a project known only as Silence. Several delegates shifted in their seats, clearly unsettled by the name, but none admitted to knowing its full truth. Outside the council chamber, news had already begun to leak to the public. Civilian channels buzzed with rumors. Old Terran. Colonies began lighting ancient distress beacons, and children on frontier worlds spoke the name Terran with awe instead of fear. Protesters gathered on outer stations, demanding the council tell the truth about the end of the Terran Union. Inside the chamber, the situation turned worse when a live signal arrived, this time not from Veros III, but from deep space, a battered transmission from a second Terran ship. The room fell silent as the signal played, flickering and broken, showing the scarred face of Colonel Saren Voss, who identified himself as a survivor of the last Union strike fleet and claimed to hold proof that humanity had not fallen by war, but by betrayal from within the Council itself. Delegates erupted in chaos, accusations flying, security scrambling to verify the signal's location, and several members walking out, faces pale and silent. Back on the Dawnbreaker, Admiral Calderon received the same transmission, her face cold and unreadable as Athena ran voice recognition and confirmed its authenticity. Colonel Voss, status, alive. Message fragment includes reference to Project Silence. Calderon stared out at the stars, mind racing. If Voss was right, then the galaxy hadn't forgotten them. They had been erased. She turned to her officers, now fully awake and armed. Prepare to retrieve Voss. We need the truth. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, the divisions deepened. The Carnathi pushed for a united strike force to eliminate the Dawnbreaker before it rallied allies. The Valthari resisted, calling for dialogue and historical investigation. The Lorne Syndicate offered spies and sabotage in secret, playing both sides as they always had. But beneath all the political noise, fear was the loudest voice. Fear that the Terrans would seek vengeance. Fear that the old power, the one that had once held the line when all others fell, had returned stronger than before. Fear that they would no longer ask for peace but demand answers. The Council agreed to send a second diplomatic team, this time accompanied by hidden warships positioned at the edge of the Veros system, armed and ready in case talks failed. But on the Dawnbreaker, Calderon knew the truth. This was not diplomacy, it was a test. One wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, and the Council would try to finish what it had failed to do centuries ago. And yet, in her heart, Calderon did not feel anger. Not yet. She felt purpose. The Dawnbreaker had risen, not to conquer, but to uncover. If Project Silence was real, if the Terran Union had been betrayed, then justice would not come from speeches. It would come from light cutting through darkness, from truth spoken through steel, and from a people the galaxy had buried, now standing tall in armor once feared by all. In the silence of deep space just beyond the red sands of Veros III, the Terran supercarrier Dawnbreaker floated like a shadow made of steel and secrets, its hull now fully powered, systems restored, and crew awake. Each soldier, engineer, and officer walking its wide halls with quiet purpose as though centuries of sleep had only been a brief pause. Yet even as weapons were calibrated and engines tested, Admiral Rhea Calderon stood in the command center with her arms crossed, watching new signals arrive from the Galactic Council, signals that spoke not of war but of peace. It was strange. After everything, after seeing Council ships circling like predators, after intercepting whispers of strike plans and sabotage teams, they were now offering peace talks, open meetings, and cultural exchanges, sending words wrapped in calm tones and polished promises. And yet Calderon could feel the weight behind each syllable, like the edge of a blade pressed to the throat. Athena, the Dawnbreaker's AI, processed every communication and flagged nearly all of them for double meanings, phrases that could be interpreted as veiled threats or hidden tests, language wrapped in protocol, but sharp with suspicion. Still, Calderon allowed the diplomatic shuttle to approach. This time, the Council sent an unusual team, an unarmed group led by a young Ilyari linguist named Kael, chosen not for politics but for his skill in ancient Terran dialects, a quiet, curious figure with silver markings on his skin and eyes that seemed too soft for the job. He was escorted into the Dawnbreaker's grand chamber by 2 Terran Marines in dark armor, the walls towering high above like a cathedral of steel. Kael stood before Calderon and bowed, his voice trembling only slightly as he spoke. "I've come to learn, and to listen." For a moment there was no answer. Then Calderon stepped forward, her gaze steady, her words plain. "Then listen. Well, we remember everything. The silence, the betrayal, the bodies left drifting in Union space. She turned and walked to a large table where old star maps flickered above the surface. You ask for peace now, but what were your hands doing? When Earth burned? Cale didn't flinch. I don't know. I wasn't alive then, but maybe someone has to be the first to believe the cycle can end. Calderon studied him, unsure if he was a fool or something rarer. A voice not trying to command, but to understand. She agreed to let him stay for a while, under guard. As Cale moved through the Dawnbreaker's halls, he saw things no outsider ever had. Stasis bays filled with still sleeping Terran soldiers, a memory archive built from war logs and last messages, training chambers where young officers sparred, in silence, their movements precise and sharp. What he didn't see was rage. The crew of the Dawnbreaker didn't scream for vengeance. They moved with the steady discipline of people who had known loss, buried it, and carried the weight forward. Still, tension grew outside. Council warships moved closer, pretending to patrol. Surveillance drones appeared in nearby asteroid belts. And a listening post on the dark moon of Corel was suddenly reactivated. Calderon watched each move like a chess player reading the board, knowing the threat of peace could be more dangerous than war. Because peace could be used to blind, to lower shields, to soften before striking. Meanwhile, Athena located Colonel Voss's signal again, this time stable, though faint, originating from an ancient outpost near the edge of Council territory, once marked as destroyed during the Collapse Wars. Calderon made her decision. A retrieval team would go, not in stealth but in strength. A single Terran cruiser, the TNS Resolute, left the Dawnbreaker's bay under full power, its engines roaring through the stars like a forgotten song. On board were elite Marines, engineers, and a special AI shard of Athena herself, all prepared to bring Voss back or, if necessary, silence him forever if his story had turned false. As the Resolute moved away, the Council took notice. Interceptors were scrambled. Messages flooded back to the Dawnbreaker, asking why a Terran warship had entered active space. Calderon responded with one sentence. We are retrieving one of our own. No more, no less. On Selvaris, the Council panicked. The peace bloc demanded answers. The defense ring urged preemptive action, but none wanted to be the one to fire first. They didn't know if the Dawnbreaker would retaliate, or disappear again, waiting another 700 years. On board the Resolute, the crew reached the outpost and found it in ruins, torn by time and half swallowed by space dust. Yet inside, shielded behind emergency power fields, Colonel Saren Voss stood alive, older, thinner, with cybernetic repairs and tired eyes. He smiled when the Terran soldiers stepped into the dark. Took you long enough, he said. When brought aboard, he didn't speak of vengeance. He spoke of truth. Project Silence, he explained, had been a secret pact made by high-ranking officials in both the early Council and corrupt Terran elements who feared what humanity might become if left unchecked. Too independent, too powerful, too unpredictable. The plan had been to dissolve the Union through engineered chaos, false flag wars, and internal sabotage, using AI viruses and betrayal from within to make the collapse seem natural. But not all Terran ships had fallen. The Dawnbreaker had vanished, yes, but others had scattered, gone dark, waiting, hiding. We were never extinct, Voss said quietly. We were waiting for the right voice to call us back. Calderon listened in silence when the Resolute returned. She didn't weep, she didn't shout. She gave orders. Athena's voice filled the command deck once more. Reactivating long-reach channel, message frequency Omega Red, transmitting call to remaining Terran vessels and hidden stations. A single pulse was sent across space, encrypted and ancient, a signal not heard in centuries. In forgotten corners of the galaxy, old satellites blinked to life. In asteroid colonies, red lights flashed. Deep in nebula-shrouded vaults, ships powered on. Humanity was not rising in anger. It was rising in response. And somewhere in the depths of space a shadow stirred. Not Council, not Terran, but something older. Something that had once watched the stars burn and now watched them flicker again. The threat of peace had passed. Now came the weight of truth. Across the dark expanse of space, where stars drifted like ancient eyes and forgotten signals still whispered from the void, the truth of Project Silence began to rise from the shadows, like a buried blade cutting through time itself, and on the bridge of the Dawnbreaker, Admiral Rhea Calderon stood still, listening to the full recording recovered from Colonel Saren Voss. A confession, a revelation, and a warning, all tangled together in a voice weighed down by years of silence and betrayal. The message told of secret meetings held behind the back of the Terran Union, of powerful council members and a faction within Earth's own leadership who had feared humanity's strength, not because it was cruel or greedy, but because it was unpredictable, fast, and too resistant to the chains of control. Voss had been part of an elite intelligence unit, once loyal to the Union, but he had uncovered files detailing how these conspirators had slowly injected chaos into Terran systems, false data sent to command ships during battle, AI viruses, disguised as upgrades, diplomatic sabotage to make allies doubt human intentions, and financial crashes triggered by manipulated markets across colony worlds. Each event had seemed natural, a tragic accident or political failure, until the Union could no longer hold itself together. Its fleets fractured, its leaders hunted, its people turned against one another, and finally, silence. The Council had watched it all unfold and then erased the records, branding the fall as a Terran collapse caused by arrogance and internal strife. But it had not been natural. It had been engineered. Calderon's fists clenched behind her back, and she spoke no words, only giving Athena a look that meant everything. The AI responded by deploying a team to dig deeper. Data vaults, ancient satellites, ghost stations still hidden in the dark corners of Union space. All were activated, and each brought fragments of truth to light. The pieces fit like a puzzle, soaked in blood. The original leaders of Project Silence had feared humanity, not because it was violent, but because it refused to bow. Terrans had helped win the collapse wars, had protected entire species, and had turned the tide of invasions from extragalactic threats, but they had done it on their own terms, not as servants of the Council. They had their own AI, their own tech, and their own way of seeing the galaxy, and that was what could not be allowed to spread. Voss revealed one more thing, a final phase of Project Silence that had never been completed, a device called HFY, hidden in a lost system beyond the Euron expanse, built to emit a pulse that could permanently disable Terran AI systems across light years, designed to erase all remaining Terran tech in one move if any ship or colony survived. The Council had believed the device was never needed. They thought humanity had already been erased. But it was still out there, buried, waiting, and worse, it was not under their control anymore. Calderon knew what this meant. If the HFY device was activated, the Dawnbreaker and every surviving Terran AI-driven ship or colony would go dark, lifeless and helpless, and someone out there might still have the access codes. She called an emergency war council with her officers and senior strategists. The room was tense, the air heavy with the weight of history, and Calderon explained everything with clarity. "We cannot strike first," she said, "but we cannot wait to die either." They agreed on a mission. The Dawnbreaker would locate and secure the HFY system. No transmission would be sent to the Council. No threat. No declaration. Just quiet, deliberate movement. Meanwhile, in Council space, not all members were blind. A few had begun their own investigations, and among them was Kyle, the Ilyari linguist who remained on the Dawnbreaker, now trusted enough to see more than most outsiders. He had been translating old Union records, uncovering hidden patterns in speech, codes buried in Terran military protocols, until he found one phrase repeated across dozens of seemingly unrelated files. Echo Protocol, activated upon breach of trust. Kale brought this to Calderon, and she froze. Echo Protocol had been a last resort measure, buried deep in AI command cores. If triggered, it would awaken sleeper agents, AI fragments, and autonomous Terran drones in hidden places across the galaxy. Not for revenge, but for survival. If HFY was activated, Echo would follow. Calderon turned to Athena. Is Echo live? The AI paused for a long second. Unknown. Parts of the network are waking. Unknown actors are moving. That night, far away in a remote part of space, a Terran satellite blinked for the first time in centuries. A drone factory on a moon no longer listed on maps powered up. And near the edge of known space, a derelict battleship called Enduring Star came to life, its AI speaking only one sentence. Echo received, confirming directive, preserve humanity. But the Dawnbreaker was not alone in chasing Arcfall. Unknown ships began appearing near old Union territories, ships with masked engines and stealth coatings, firing on Terran beacons and disappearing before identification. They were fast, coordinated, and clearly not pirates. Calderon suspected. Rogue council factions were moving, desperate to finish what they started. Her fleet was not large yet, but more Union remnants were answering the call each day. Old captains, former outposts, hidden allies who had kept the old flag hidden beneath floorboards and now raised it once more. A new Terran alliance was forming, not for conquest, but for truth. Still, time was running short. Arcfall had to be found first. Athena traced a pattern in old jump gate records, comparing forgotten jump signatures, narrowing it to 3 possible star systems. Calderon made her choice. The Dawnbreaker and 2 support cruisers would enter the Rift sector, a storm-racked zone of gravity wells and broken moons. It would be dangerous, unpredictable, and filled with traps left by whoever built the device. But the mission was clear. Project Silence would not finish its work. And if the truth of humanity's fall was ever going to be known, if the Terrans were ever going to stand not as ghosts, but as a people with a future, it had to begin here, at the edge of memory and betrayal, where silence had been built not by time, but by design. In the storm-choked stars of the Rift sector, where no ship dared linger for long, and magnetic winds twisted light into strange shapes, the Terran Supercarrier Dawnbreaker moved with slow purpose, its engines burning quiet and steady. As Admiral Rhea Calderon stood at the front of the command deck, eyes locked on a cluster of ancient coordinates flashing on Athena's holomap. This was it, the final piece, the place where the Arcfall device had been hidden, left behind like a loaded weapon waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to pull the trigger. And behind her, the bridge crew worked in silence, knowing that what waited in that system could kill them all or change the galaxy forever. As they neared the edge of the sector, sensors picked up strange echoes, like broken voices trapped in the static, and old Union command codes bouncing back from nowhere, as if something deep inside the system still remembered the fall and was now waking up. 3 massive satellites came into view first, half covered in debris and long since powered down, but as soon as the Dawnbreaker's scanners touched them, they lit up, scanning the Terran ship in return, and suddenly a path opened between them, marked by flickering lights and a beam of pulsing white energy stretching toward a dead moon, the last known location of Project Silence's final weapon. Calderon ordered the fleet to hold position while the Dawnbreaker pushed forward alone, bringing only 1 escort ship, the TNS Valor, and a stealth drone team launched ahead to check for traps. But there were no mines, no turrets, no warnings, only silence, cold and waiting, and that worried her more than any ambush. When they reached the moon, the surface appeared lifeless, but a massive metal structure jutted from the side of a crater, like the ribs of a buried beast, black and scarred with no markings, no flags, just a single Terran beacon pulsing deep. Inside, old but active, as if it had never stopped waiting for someone to return. Calderon led the landing team herself, stepping onto the moon's surface in full armor, flanked by elite soldiers and Athena's mobile core unit, a humanoid drone glowing with pale blue light, and they entered the buried complex through a sealed tunnel that opened for them with a long hiss, responding to Calderon's DNA like a child recognizing its mother after a long sleep. Inside, the air was still, untouched for centuries, and rows of lights came on slowly, revealing a vast control chamber at the heart of the installation. There it was, the Arcfall device, a sphere the size of a gunship, floating above a pool of light, surrounded by rotating rings and control pylons, its systems humming with energy that should not have lasted this long. Athena interfaced with the control core and confirmed it. The device was still functional, armed, and capable of sending a multi-frequency pulse that would wipe out any AI using old Terran code within 1,000 light years. It would not only cripple Terran ships, but erase their history, their libraries, their culture, stored in digital vaults. And Calderon felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders like a second gravity. Then Athena spoke. A signal was sent here 3 days ago, from Council space. Calderon's blood went cold. Someone knew they were coming. Someone had tried to activate the device remotely, but the signal failed. Only a proper Terran key could unlock the full system, and Calderon had that key now, in her blood and bones. A genetic code passed through command ranks only. Before she could act, alarm screamed. Ships were dropping from FTL above the moon, 6 Council vessels, including 2 heavy cruisers, and not under diplomatic banners. They opened fire on the Valor without warning, and the Terran escort returned fire, caught in a sudden battle as fighters screamed between asteroids and defense drones launched from hidden bays. Calderon ordered her ground team to stay put, defending the control chamber as Council troops landed nearby, their own team trying to breach the complex through a lower tunnel. Athena locked the doors, rerouted power, and activated dormant security. Drones, old Terran machines that woke like ghosts, scanning Calderon, then turning toward the breach and moving to defend what was theirs. The battle raged outside, but inside, Calderon knew she had one chance. Athena explained that the Arcfall device could not be moved, but it could be disarmed permanently if she overloaded the primary core with a direct neural link from a command level officer, one who could convince the system to shut down for good. It was risky. It might kill her, but it would end the threat once and for all. Calderon agreed. As Athena prepared the link, Kyle, the Ilyari linguist who had chosen to stay with the Terrans, arrived, having stowed away on the Valor to witness the end of the story he had followed since the beginning. He begged Calderon to wait, to find another way, but she shook her head. "They built this to erase us," she said. "But we're not gone. We were never gone." She placed her hand on the interface, and pain flooded her mind. A surge of memories, codes, voices, screams, flashes of Earth, of fallen colonies, of stars burning and then falling silent. And she pushed through it, giving the order. Deactivate. Shut down. No more death. The device trembled, the lights flickered, and then darkness. Silence again, but not the same. This time, it was over. The Council team broke through a second later, but they were too late. The Arcfall device was dead. Calderon stood slowly, weak but alive, and her team secured the chamber. In orbit, the Council ships pulled back, seeing that they had failed, and knowing that to attack again would mean war. The Dawnbreaker held its ground. Back aboard the carrier, a message was sent, not a threat, not a demand, but a statement, clear and final. Humanity is not extinct. It was waiting. Across the stars, Terran ships came out of hiding. Colonies powered up. AI fragments reconnected. The Dawnbreaker's signal had reached them, and the call had been answered. And in quiet rooms of the Galactic Council, leaders began to understand. They had not destroyed humanity. They had delayed it. And now, humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as survivors, stronger than before, forged in silence and ready to speak. The galaxy had a choice: accept the truth and share the future, or repeat the past and face the consequences. For the first time in centuries, the Terran anthem played in open space again, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. The stars belonged to everyone, and humanity would never be silent again.